Hey, what's going on, beautiful Jellyfish? It's Tracy. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time in your day to hang out with me. I really appreciate it. It's very weird, like, talking here, because normally my camera's over here, but I am filming a ranking modern decks video now. I am not ranking all modern decks. If you guys like this video, I will definitely do others, and if you have other videos... I also know I'm super late on this trend, but I don't know, I think these videos are so fun and so cool. All these, like, ranking things, I don't know, I just think it's really fun, so I decided to do this for modern decks. I don't know why I started with modern. I think because there's just so many commanders. I think, like, that's part of what it is, and I think if I were to do that, I'd have to do it in some sort of structure because I don't know how I would just tackle, like, commanders. So if you guys have any recommendations for that and you like this video, I'd really like it if you would let me know, because then I can definitely do a part 2 to this if you like it. But let's just hop into it. Please do not ask me why I have a bright red mark on my forehead, because truthfully I have no idea. Okay, basically I looked at decks that... Yeah, this is kind of just like a mix of a bunch of different things. Like, these are decks that I've played, these are decks that I'm just, like, thinking of on the top of my brain, whatever. So this is just, there's no really, like, rhyme or reason to, like, why I chose these, because obviously there's a lot of modern decks, and honestly, if I were to do them in all one video, I just think that would be too much. But these are the 5 categories that I have selected. At the top, we have want to play modern again, so I actually don't play modern anymore. That is the category, is like, this deck would make me want to play it. Then I have, like, Tassiger Bananas, which is, like, obviously, like, the next step, which is just, like, this deck is just cool. Like, this deck is, like, fun. Maybe I wouldn't, it's also, like, I want my modern again, but I'm like, cool. Respect is, like, I think it's one of those things where it's, like, I personally wouldn't play it, but I respect that deck. I respect the people who play it. Understood. You're, like, honest citizen. You're doing your thing. Get it. You know what I mean? Meh is, like, whatever. Like, don't have a strong attachment to this deck. It's, like, whatever. Don't really care about it. And then we have Dumpster Fire, Loathing, Unadulterated Loathing. For her face, her voice, her clothing. Any Wicked fans out there? Gotcha. Okay. Let's just... I don't know if I want to go in order. These are not in any order. Just to be, like, very clear. These are not in literally any order. This is just straight up, these are things. This was whatever. So, let's just, like... Let me just, like, go here and just pick one. Okay. Scape Shift. Okay. Gosh, I feel like I'm gonna put Scape Shift in, like, the meh category. And, like, here's my reason for this. Is I feel like Scape Shift is just kind of a whatever deck. Like, my whole thing behind it is, like, don't you just get bored of doing the same thing? Don't you just get bored of playing Valakut and, like, getting your lands and accelerating? Like, that's, like, my biggest thing with that deck is, I think once you get the pattern down and you figure out, like, what to do and how to do it, like, seems like a pretty straightforward deck to, like, pilot. I think you just do it, and there's just, like, no interaction. Like, you just do your own thing. You don't really care what your opponent's doing. It just, like, that's never, ever a deck that I would, like, ever want to play. Not my jam at all. Like, just, you know. But it's not, like, hatred. It's not like, oh, I hate this deck. I just think it's kind of boring. TBH, you know? Anyone else? Okay. Let's just mouse and wheel. Okay, Tron, Dumpster Fire. Literally, zero question. This Dumpster Fire card was literally for Tron. I hate Tron. I've always just really hated this deck, and I think it's just, like, from my memories of it, it was just really, like, unfair and just not fun to play against. And, like, I guess you'd have fun playing it, but, like, you don't do anything in your first couple turns at all, and I feel like this deck just, you open yourself up to, like, if your opponent is playing anything quick, like, you just die. And that's, like, the thing that's always really confused me about Tron is, like, you don't do anything the first 3 turns. Like, you literally don't. So it's, like, how does this deck even win sometimes? You know what I mean? I guess, like, you get to 7 mana and you drop, like, what your big thing, whatever. I don't know. I've never been a fan of Tron. Just, if I could set, like, a deck on fire, it would 100% be, like, Tron. Like, I hate it, you know? Okay, let's talk about Burn. I'm contemplating either Respect or Meh. I feel like Burn is a misunderstood deck. You know what I mean? Like, Burn is, like, that misunderstood kid that, like, no one, like, sits and takes the time to chat with, like, but has, like, a lot of feelings. That's the way I feel about Burn, you know? Is, like, people are like, Burn is so easy, you just lightning bolt people to death. And I'm like, dude, here's, like, the reality. And I've done a whole video on this. Burn is not an easy deck. You have to make decisions sometimes that are really difficult and really tricky. Do you lightning bolt, double bolt your opponent's creature? to kill it, or do you double their face for 6? Like, there are decisions that happen in Burn, and it really bothers me. People are like, it's just such an easy deck. Like, all you let. Do you have games that are like that? Absolutely. There are other games, though, where you have to make difficult decisions, and for an inexperienced player, piloting Burn, which I don't use inexperienced as, like, a negative thing, because I feel like people think that. I'm not using it as a negative thing. It's just, like, if you don't have as much experience with it, Burn can be a little bit tricky. So, I would say I personally would not pilot it. I'm contemplating on Respect or Meh. I'm going to put it in Respect, I feel like. I like it. I think it's a cool deck. I think the variations of it are super cool. I think, like, if I were to do Burn, I probably wouldn't, if I were to ever get back into Modern or ever to run Burn for whatever reason, like, Burn was really good or something like that, I probably wouldn't do just Mono Red. I'd probably do, like, a Splash and just run, like, White for, like, Boros Charm and things, you know. Some people do Black for, like, Bump in the Night, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't really think Black offers you a ton. Do you know what I mean? But I've also seen people do Green as well for the Charm. What is that Charm called? I'm blanking on what it's called, but yeah. Anyways, that's Burn. Okay, cool. Let's go next to, Death and Taxes, aka D and T. I feel like I'm contemplating between Bananas or Respect for this deck. I'm gonna put this deck in Respect. I think that Death and Taxes is a very, like, when I think about, and I feel like some people might disagree with me for this, which I totally think is fine, but I think Death and Taxes is a very, like, fair deck. It's very much like, I'm just going to try to stop you from doing your things. Like, I'm just going to play my Thalia, your thing costs 1 more, which is so incredibly detrimental. Like, in a modern game, I think, like, it's interesting because I play Thalia in my Lady Commander deck, and I feel like I definitely 100% appreciate Thalia and respect Thalia, but I feel like in those sorts of situations, I'm like, wow, this in a modern setting, like, must be just significantly better than, like, not to say it's not good in Commander, because it absolutely is, but I just think, like, 1v1 when you're, like, so tight for mana, I think it can be really detrimental for your opponent. So I really like Death and Taxes. I think it's a very cool deck, and yeah, it just does its thing. It's like, this is what I'm doing, and it just goes from there, you know what I mean? Okay, I don't know how I feel about going out of order. Is this, like, as anyone else is, like, thrown off by this order thing? We're just gonna go in order now. Okay. We have Slippery Boggles, or Bogle. How do you guys pronounce that? Just out of curiosity. I've always pronounced it like Boggles, but some people pronounce it like Boggles, which is interesting. But, you know, the whole premises of Boggles is you have this hexproof dude, and you're just, like, doing your thing, you know? I feel like, I guess I'm gonna put this in meh. I think, like, I kind of feel similarly to how I feel about Scape Shift, is it's just kind of like, oh, I just pump my thing and you're dead. And I just think it's kind of like a meh Commander deck, right? Like, I think it's one of those where it's the same end game goal at every game. Does that get boring? And I think, like, honestly, I think Boggles is probably one of the easiest things to do. You just have your thing and you just buff it. Like, doesn't seem to be, like, a whole lot of stuff there. I just think it would be boring just to play one thing and then just buff it and, like, you know, whatever. I don't know. Boggles just seems kind of lame. Anyone else? I don't know. Okay. I put Tasigur on here because Tasigur is for, why am I blanking on the Grixis? Yeah, don't know why I struggled with that for a second. For Grixis Control. I played Grixis Control for a while when I was playing Modern, and I really enjoyed playing Grixis Control. It was super fun. You know, Tasigur is, like, one of your bombs, which is really cool. One of the best things, too, to be able to do is, like, play, like, a turn 2 Tasigur, because I was also playing Thought Scours in the list, which was super fun. And I think also, at the time I was playing it, I feel like Thought Scour was incredibly underutilized as just a card in general, and that card is so incredibly good in Tasigur because you could, again, potentially get out Tasigur with your, like, fetch lands and your Thought Scours on turn, like, 2, which is insane. And I think it's insane, too, because you're playing a control deck where, like, your whole thing is, like, I want this game to go out in the late game and the mid game and the late game because I'm gonna, like, throw my Tasigur down when you have no creatures to just attack you. So getting out of Tasigur on, like, turn 2 or turn 3 is, like, pretty cool. So, yeah, I mean, like, here's my thing is, I'm hitting, like, a little snag, because do I put Tasigur in Tasigur Bananas, or do I put it in Wanna Play Modern again? I don't know. I feel like to be honest with you guys, I think if I were to play a control deck again, I don't know if I would play Grixis or if I would play... Yeah, I don't know if I would play Grixis or if I would play like a blue-white, which we'll talk about in a second. So I think I don't know if it's up here, but I did really enjoy playing Grixis, and I thought it was so strong, and I think Grixis as a whole was a very, and I'm sure still is, a very underrated, underappreciated deck. And if built correctly, and I think that was the trick, is I think I've grown so much as a deck builder that I think if I were to build that deck now, it would just be a lot better, and it would be a lot different, because like I'm a lot better as a deck builder. But that deck was super fun, and it was a ton of fun. You know, it was a great deck. So let's talk about blue-white. Blue-white does make me want to play like Modern again. I think that blue-white was like, I had one of the coolest, in my opinion, like deck lists for like a minute when I went into this one tournament. I went to this I think it was a PTQ a really long time ago, and I had this blue-white list, and it was the coolest list. And I think, like, one thing, too, that I will say is I think a lot of times when people think these decks, they think of a very, like, narrow, like, this is what the deck is. And I think, like, I'm always someone who's, like, doing different things. So, like, my blue-white probably doesn't look the same as your blue-white. So this blue-white list was a crazy board wipe list. It ran, like, 4 Wrath of Gods. Sorry, it did not run 4 Wrath of Gods. It ran, like, 4 Supreme Verdicts. It ran, like, 2 Wrath of Gods or 3 Wrath of Gods. Like, it was insane. The removal was literally insane. You ran, like, 4 Path to Exiles. You ran, like, a sword. Was it Sword Sabasha or Condemn? It was Condemn. And you're running, like, all this stuff and, like, all this removal. And the deck was just insane. Like, the matchups that if it was one of those, like, if you got matched up and your opponent was playing creatures, they were not playing creatures because you literally killed everything. It was, like, such a cool deck. One of my biggest things that I've been thinking about this a lot recently, which is, like, such a dumb thing, but, like, the fact that, like, I just hard cast these like celestial colonnades and just played 4. Like, blows my mind that I literally ran 4 celestial colonnades with this deck. Don't understand, would never do that again. Max run 3. Don't know why I ever chose to run 4. That was insane. That was like a very weird like decision, and I know that's only sounds like 1 card, but it was like insane. Sometimes you just have like all these celestial colonnades. It's like, what? Okay, let's talk next about Affinity, and gosh, man, yeah, like, respect Affinity. We're gonna put that there. I really like Affinity. I think Affinity is such a cool deck, and I think Affinity is, like, that cool kid that's just like, I'm doing my own thing. You know what I mean? Like, Affinity is, like, always over here, just like, whatever, I'm cool, I'm happy. And I think, like, one of the really awesome things, too, about Affinity, whatever it is nowadays, but, like, back then or whatever, like, I remember, like, when I was playing Modern, it was so, like, the variations were so interesting. It was like, what color are you splashing in your Affinity deck? It was like, are you going Thoughtcast? Like, it was so cool to be, like, to talk to people about, like, their different variations and, like, how they felt about Affinity. And Affinity, to me, was really one of the trickiest decks out there, definitely. And I think your Arcbound Ravager math is, like, super hard. Are you going Infect? Like, there's so many pieces and so many ways you can win in that deck that I think makes it so, like, a jack of all trades thing, right? Like, are you killing them via Infect? Are you going wide? Are you going, like, one big creature that you're pumping? Like, what is it that you're doing, you know? And I think that's always been really, really cool about Affinity, and gosh, it's cool. Black-white tokens. I had to put this on here because originally this video was going to be ranking my Modern decks that I played. So let me know if you guys would be interested in that. I can do a different video on that. But man, like, black-white tokens is such... I have so many fond memories of that deck. And I feel like I feel very similarly to how I feel about, like, what's this called? Death and Taxes. Like, a very fair, like, deck. Very fair. Like, I don't know if I would necessarily put this in the... maybe I would put it in the meh category, actually, because I think, personally, like, would I ever play that deck again? No. It was such a good, like, beginner deck, but it was so fun, and just running, like, Intangible Virtue, like, there was nothing quite like playing Intangible Virtue, and like Sorin Grim Nemesis. And I think one of the coolest things about that build as well was your Planeswalker package was so incredibly unique because, you know, you have this 4 mana slot and it's like, what Planeswalker are you running? And there were so many different options of things you could do, and that deck was like really cool. So I'm gonna put it in the meta category, and I'm like talking about this like super highly, but I feel like it was like one of those things where it was like, thank you so much for the memories, like I really appreciate it, but like I've moved on, you know what I mean? Like that's how I feel about that deck, you know. Okay, all right, let's talk about Elves. Shaman of the Pack Elves. Gosh, this deck was so cool. It was so like, I think explosive is truthfully like the best word for it, and I feel like when people think about Elves, some people don't think about that. And I'm like, dude, that deck was so, like, Coco into double Shaman of the Pack, like, there was truthfully nothing like casting that. That's, like, the thing I love, too, about, like, Black-White Tokens is, like, oh my god, there was nothing quite like, you know, playing that. And, like, Zealous, not Zealous Conscripts, Zealous Persecution. Like, playing Zealous Persecution, and, like, there was nothing quite like playing Black-White Token. Sorry. Well, there's nothing quite like playing that, but, like, there was nothing like playing Coco. And, like, double Shaman. Like, that deck is so cool. I'm definitely gonna put this in the respect category. I think, like, yeah, I just think it's really cool. Like, I do. I really enjoy it, and I definitely do miss casting, like, Shaman of the Pack, you know? Cards that you miss casting. Primetime is hands down going in the number 1 wanna play Modern again. I know the deck is obviously different now because not Amulet. What's the card that's banned that I'm blanking on the name of, but the card that got banned in that deck that I literally cannot think of the name of right now. I absolutely love the concept, the cards, the math, every single thing about Primetime is incredible. Like, there is nothing like that deck. It is so intricate and complicated, and it's like, it's so cool. Like, truthfully, I really mean this, there was nothing like casting Primeval Titan. Like, nothing in the magic world, that sounds, nothing in the world compares to this, but like, nothing in the magical world has compared to playing this deck. Nothing. I mean, I've played a handful of Modern decks, and I've also, like, borrowed friends' decks and stuff, and, like, the feelings that you get when you cast a turn 2, turn 3 Primeval Titan and swing for a bunch of damage, like, if you've never done that before, it's like a bucket list thing to do. Like, you need to do it, because I think it's one of those things that if you don't get it, you don't get it, you know? I could go on seriously and on about this deck just being so incredibly complicated, and I think it's one of those decks that you can sit down and watch someone piloting the deck. Sorry, the cats, if you can hear them. You could sit down and watch someone pilot the deck, and I don't think that's challenging. I don't think it's hard to watch people pilot the deck. If you're, like, new to it, yeah, that might be like, what is going on? But I don't think it's difficult to watch people play the deck, but the decisions you have to make and the lands you need and what you're choosing to bounce makes this for one of the most challenging decks ever. It's so intricate and so complicated that I think a lot of people, like, don't realize, like, oh, you just, like, bounce your bounce land. And it's like, yeah, like, sometimes you don't, and sometimes you bounce other things. It's like one of those things that once the more you play it, the better at it you're obviously gonna get, and like, you're gonna figure out those intricacies and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, when you have, like, mana, people, like, blowing up your lands, that gets really complicated and everything. It's a very, very, very cool deck. Like, honestly, if I could just play Modern and just play that deck and, like, get really good at that deck, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, I have, like, the base level understanding and, like, maybe a little bit more knowledge than your average person because I've piloted it, but, like, I'm nowhere near, like, the level to, like, be, like, amazing at that deck, you know? And I'm probably never going to, but, like, seriously, a cool deck. Okay, I knew I was going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but okay, next up we have Storm, and I feel Storm's going in the Tassiger Bananas category, and I love Storm. I think Storm is so cool. I think it's one of those things very similar to Primetime, you know, it's a combo deck, but, like, not similar in, like, they're similar playing out, like, similar in that they're a combo deck. Let's be very clear here. I've always really liked Storm. I think it takes a special kind of pilot to play that deck well. You have to know when to push, you have to know when to try, you have to think about how much mana your opponent has open, you have to think, what happens if my creature dies, what happens if this spell gets countered, like, there's a lot of things that you have to think about how your opponent's going to react. And I think, like, the thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is when you are piloting a deck, it's not just about you, it's about how your opponent is going to interact with your deck. And I don't think a lot of people understand that concept, where it's not just like, oh, I need to think about, like, well, yeah, you might understand the Primeval Titan combo, or you might understand how Storm works, but you also need to keep in mind, how is your opponent, what's going to change if that creature dies? What's going to change if that spell is countered? What's going to change if your land gets destroyed and you've lost your only blue source? Like, these are things that you need to keep in mind when you're playing a deck like this. So I think Storm is so incredibly cool. I think, like, it just... there's nothing quite like that. You know what I mean? It's just so cool. A lot of triggers, a lot of stuff to keep up with. I think, like, one of the biggest things that I would say about that deck is, like, if you're playing it, just have your ways of keeping track of your stuff. Because, like, one of the things too is that I noticed is, like, a lot of times, like, people will be playing, maybe this doesn't happen less so in Modern, but people will be like, oh, I had a red mana, right, floating? And they ask their opponent, it's like, dude, like, you cannot ask your opponent for stuff like that. You need to keep track of it yourself, you know? Also, your opponent could just lie, like, or whatever. It's not their job to keep track of it. It's yours as the pilot. So keeping track, making sure you have all your things. So I feel like some people are just like, I don't need to keep track of, like, how much red mana I have in my pool. I was like, yes, you do. Stop. Like, just get over it. Put a thing. That's, like, one of the things that I think, like, I feel like people too will do that with, like, they won't put, like, a thing on top of their library to remember the trigger. It's like, I don't need to remember that to remember my trigger. I can just do it. It's like, okay, like, yeah, maybe that only happens 1 in 500 times, but that's still one time that could have easily been prevented if you just put something on top of your library. You know what I mean? It bothers me. Okay. Last deck we're going to talk about in this video is Jaund. I don't think Jaund could be in the Tastic or Bananas category, but I definitely have respect for this deck, and I'm going to put that there. I think Jaund is a very fair, like, to me, Jaund is such an old school deck. You know what I mean? Like, there's some decks that really have that, like, old school, like, vibe, right? Like, this is what Modern is, you know what I mean? And Jaund gives me that vibe. I think, like, things that have always held me back from piloting Jaund that I've never been a fan of is just the amount of life you lose. I think they play Dark Confidant, which I've never been a fan of. Dark Confidant, I don't really like that card, which I know people have very strong opinions about that card, but I've never really liked that. I think you just lose a ton of life. But I think the strengths of Jaund is you get to play such strong cards, like, you get to play really great, like, Culligan's Command. Your removal is really great. You have a ton of hand disruption. You're running Thoughtseizes, Inquisitions. Also, I feel like you have such a good one-to-one removal. Like, your tempo out so well in a deck like that. And I think it's so cool. You're running such really, really cool cards, and you're playing really powerful cards as well, and really ultimately, like, doing a lot to stop your opponent. So, yeah, Jaund definitely has it in the respect category for me. So, y'all, that is it for my Modern ranking. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked this video and you want me to do some other ones, I had a ton of fun with this. I thought this was a lot of fun and really enjoyable. And if I do this again, if I do it again with Modern ones, if you guys want me to keep doing it, I will keep these categories. But if I do something else, I'll probably change things up and do it based on the needs. But let me know if there's any specific, like, I was thinking I could do, like, art, like, I could do, like, specific art cards. I could do maybe, like, counter spells. I think that would be a really fun one to do, like, counter spells. I think that would be a really cool video. So let me know what other ranking videos, if you guys like this video, let me know which ones that you would like to see. If you guys did like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and I'll catch you in the next one.